The conference room fell completely silent the instant the celebrated CEO slammed a thick contract onto the polished table and declared, with tears she had spent years refusing to shed burning in her eyes, that every man eventually disappointed the people who trusted him. Hundreds of employees froze. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. Then, from the very back of the room, where nobody expected wisdom to come from, a quiet single father stood holding his young daughter's backpack and calmly said that perhaps the problem was not that all men were the same, but that pain often convinced good people to stop seeing the ones who quietly chose kindness every single day. That single sentence changed not only the room but the lives of everyone who heard it. If you believe kindness is stronger than pride, forgiveness is braver than revenge, and hope deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel. Every act of support helps our community continue sharing stories that remind our family that compassion can still change lives. Meredith Holloway had built one of the fastest growing technology companies in the country. Newspapers admired her discipline. Business magazines called her unstoppable. Television hosts described her as fearless. Employees respected her intelligence but quietly feared her emotional distance. She demanded perfection because she believed weakness invited betrayal. Years earlier she had trusted people who promised loyalty before abandoning her during the most painful chapter of her life. Her former husband had disappeared when the company struggled. Business partners had protected themselves instead of standing beside her. Even her closest friends had quietly drifted away once success became difficult. Meredith survived by convincing herself that emotions only slowed people down. She became richer every year while somehow feeling poorer inside. The company had recently launched a scholarship program for working parents. Among hundreds of applicants was a maintenance supervisor named Graham Whitmore. Every morning, long before executives arrived, Graham cleaned conference rooms, repaired broken equipment, and quietly solved problems that nobody else noticed. He arrived with a smile that never looked forced despite carrying responsibilities most people could barely imagine. His wife had passed away from an illness several years earlier, leaving him to raise 8-year-old Eliza alone. He packed lunches decorated with tiny handwritten notes, braided her hair after watching dozens of tutorial videos, attended every school assembly, and somehow still reached work before sunrise. He never considered himself extraordinary. He simply believed that love was something proven through ordinary actions repeated every day. Most executives barely noticed Graham because he never searched for attention. Yet dozens of employees secretly admired him. Whenever a new worker felt overwhelmed, Graham quietly helped without expecting praise. If someone forgot lunch, he shared his own. If a nervous intern made an expensive mistake, Graham stayed late helping fix it instead of criticizing them. His kindness spread through the building like sunlight through open windows. People rarely talked about it publicly, but everyone remembered how he made them feel. Eliza often visited the office during school holidays because childcare was expensive. She spent afternoons reading books in a quiet corner while drawing colorful pictures of imaginary cities where everyone helped one another. Many employees smiled whenever they saw her. She greeted receptionists, security guards, accountants, and cleaners with the same cheerful respect. Graham constantly reminded her that every person deserved dignity regardless of job title or income. Meredith rarely noticed those small moments. Her calendar was too full. Her meetings never ended. Every conversation centered on profits, expansion, competition, or risk. The emotional walls surrounding her had become so familiar that she no longer realized they existed. Everything changed during the annual leadership summit held inside the company's headquarters. Journalists gathered to interview Meredith about workplace culture and leadership. One reporter asked whether trust remained important in modern business. The question unexpectedly reopened wounds Meredith had buried for years. Instead of answering carefully, she admitted that experience had convinced her men always promised more than they delivered. She explained that disappointment had become predictable because, in her view, every man eventually chose himself over the people depending on him. The room grew painfully quiet. Some employees looked uncomfortable. Others lowered their eyes. A few quietly nodded because they knew pieces of Meredith's painful history. Nobody wanted to challenge the powerful CEO during a live event. At that exact moment Graham had entered carrying Eliza's forgotten backpack after dropping it off for her school project displayed in the lobby. He had no intention of interrupting anyone. Yet hearing such hopeless certainty spoken as though it were an undeniable truth stirred something inside him. Without anger or disrespect, he gently explained that heartbreak had every right to leave scars, but scars should never become maps for judging every stranger. He admitted that some men failed their families terribly. Others betrayed trust beyond repair. But many quietly spent their lives sacrificing dreams, comfort, sleep, and happiness for children who might never fully understand those sacrifices until adulthood. Those men rarely appeared in headlines because steady love was quieter than dramatic betrayal. Every camera turned toward Graham. Meredith looked irritated at first, assuming another employee wanted attention. Then she noticed the little backpack in his hand decorated with colorful drawings and stitched repairs. It had been carefully mended instead of replaced because money was tight. She noticed his tired eyes that somehow still carried warmth instead of resentment. The moderator invited Graham to continue. He shared no dramatic speech. Instead, he simply described ordinary mornings filled with making pancakes that sometimes burned, helping with homework before work, learning hairstyles through trial and error, attending parent meetings surrounded mostly by mothers, and promising himself every afternoon that his daughter would never doubt she was deeply loved despite growing up without her mother. He admitted he often felt exhausted and frightened, but love never asked whether something was convenient. Nobody applauded immediately because many people were quietly wiping away tears. Meredith dismissed the session early, pretending she had another meeting. In truth, Graham's words unsettled beliefs she had spent years protecting. Over the following weeks she unintentionally began noticing things previously invisible to her. She saw Graham repairing a wheelchair ramp before anyone reported the problem. She watched him kneel beside a frightened intern after the young employee accidentally damaged expensive equipment. Rather than criticizing, Graham patiently taught the repair process while reassuring the intern that mistakes did not define character. She noticed Eliza waiting after school with homework spread across a cafeteria table while Graham finished repairing a water leak. Instead of complaining, the little girl proudly colored thank you cards for employees who had smiled at her that week. One afternoon Meredith walked past as Graham apologized to Eliza because he could not afford an expensive amusement park trip advertised by her classmates. Meredith expected disappointment. Instead Eliza hugged her father and cheerfully suggested having a picnic in the city park because homemade sandwiches tasted better anyway. Meredith stood hidden around the corner longer than she intended. The memory awakened another version of herself she barely remembered. Before ambition consumed every hour, she too had believed happiness came from people rather than possessions. Days later the company faced an unexpected crisis. A software failure threatened an important product launch. Executives argued nervously. Departments blamed each other. Stress filled every hallway. While senior leaders debated responsibility, Graham quietly organized volunteers from different departments to move equipment, comfort frustrated staff, and keep operations running smoothly. He reminded everyone to eat lunch, drink water, and breathe before making decisions. His calm presence prevented panic from spreading. Meredith observed everything from her office window. For the first time in years she questioned whether true leadership looked less like commanding people and more like serving them. After the crisis ended successfully, Meredith requested Graham join her for a conversation during the afternoon. Many employees assumed he was in trouble. Instead Meredith asked a simple question she had never imagined asking an employee. She wanted to know how someone who had experienced devastating loss still trusted people enough to keep choosing kindness. Graham smiled sadly before explaining that bitterness would have been easier. After losing his wife he had nearly surrendered to anger because life felt unbearably unfair. Then one afternoon Eliza asked whether her mother would still recognize the family if sadness changed them into different people. That innocent question transformed everything. He realized grief honored nobody if it destroyed the love his wife had spent her life creating. Meredith listened without interrupting. For years she believed strength meant needing nobody. Now she wondered whether real strength meant allowing hope to survive unbearable pain. Inspired by that conversation, Meredith quietly began changing company policies. She expanded flexible schedules for parents. She increased support for caregivers. She introduced anonymous employee assistance programs. She created mentorship opportunities connecting experienced workers with struggling newcomers. Most importantly, she started walking through departments instead of remaining hidden behind executive office doors. Employees noticed the difference immediately. She learned names she had previously overlooked. She thanked people whose work had quietly sustained the company for years. She even apologized privately to several managers for allowing fear to make her emotionally distant. The greatest surprise came during Family Appreciation Day, held entirely under bright afternoon sunshine outside company headquarters. Employees brought children, parents, grandparents, and friends. Laughter replaced deadlines. Music drifted through the air while families shared simple meals on long picnic tables. Meredith stood watching Graham and Eliza participate in a three-legged race. They stumbled repeatedly, laughed loudly, and finished last without caring. Something inside Meredith finally broke free. She realized perfection had never given her peace, connection did. Near the end of the celebration, Meredith stepped onto the small stage. Instead of discussing profits or future expansion, she publicly admitted she had spoken from unresolved pain rather than truth. She explained that betrayal by a few people had convinced her to stop believing in the goodness of many others. She thanked Graham for respectfully challenging her perspective instead of silently accepting it. She confessed that one sentence from an ordinary father had accomplished what years of success never could. It reminded her that healing begins the moment someone chooses understanding over judgment. Many employees cried openly, others embraced family members standing beside them. Graham looked uncomfortable with the attention because he never wanted recognition. He simply squeezed Eliza's hand. The little girl smiled proudly, not because her father had impressed a CEO, but because he had stayed true to the values she saw every day at home. Months later, the company became known not only for innovation but also for compassion. Employee satisfaction reached record levels. Staff turnover dropped dramatically. New applicants frequently mentioned the organization's reputation for treating people with dignity. Reporters credited brilliant leadership strategies. Employees quietly knew something deeper had happened. One courageous conversation had reminded everyone that assumptions, no matter how understandable, could never replace seeing people as individuals. Meredith eventually established an annual award recognizing quiet acts of everyday kindness rather than financial achievements alone. The very first recipient was Graham Whitmore, who accepted the honor with humility before dedicating it to every parent doing their best even when nobody noticed. Before we reach the end of this journey, take a moment to leave a meaningful comment. Have you ever met someone whose kindness completely changed the way you viewed the world, or have you been that person for someone else? Your story may become the encouragement another member of our community needs today. As the afternoon sun settled gently,